It was the last weekend of August in 2020 when I decided to escape the city. My job had been suffocating, and the constant noise and stress were unbearable. I spent hours scrolling Airbnb listings, looking for a place that promised quiet, isolation, and a bit of nature. That's when I found it, a small, modern cabin perched at the edge of a secluded lake in Vermont. The photos were beautiful. Large glass windows, warm wooden interiors, and the lake reflecting the sky like a perfect mirror. The reviews were glowing. Complete serenity. Perfect escape. You won't see a single soul for miles. I booked immediately. The host, Clara, was pleasant and responsive, sending me detailed directions and instructions for self-check-in. She assured me the cabin was completely private, and the only people I'd see would be me, the lake, and the trees. It sounded perfect. I arrived late Friday afternoon. The drive was long, winding through narrow country roads that were flanked by dense forests. By the time I reached the cabin, the sun was low on the horizon, and golden light filtered through the trees. The lake shimmered in the distance, a calm, unbroken expanse of water. My first thought was relief. This was exactly what I needed. The cabin was even better than the photos. A small deck faced the lake, and inside, everything smelled faintly of cedar. The floorboards creaked gently underfoot, giving the cabin an old yet comforting character. I unpacked, made a simple dinner, and settled into the couch with a glass of wine, feeling the tension of city life melt away. As the night fell, I noticed how quiet everything was. Not just quiet, it was an unnatural stillness. No insects, no animals, nothing but the gentle lapping of the lake against the shore. I told myself it was just peaceful solitude, the kind you pay for when you escape civilization. Around midnight, I was woken by a soft tapping sound on the window. At first, I ignored it. The trees were brushing against the glass, or maybe a branch had fallen. But the tapping continued, slow, deliberate, and rhythmic. Tap, tap, tap. I froze, heart thudding in my chest. I peeked through the blinds. The trees swayed, but nothing else moved. No animals, no people, just darkness. I told myself it was my imagination, maybe the wind or a branch. But then I heard it, a faint whisper, almost carried by the wind. Hello? I jumped back. My cabin was supposed to be private. The lake was distant, the forest dense. How could anyone even be near me? I checked the locks on the doors and windows. Everything was secure. My pulse was racing, but I tried to calm myself. I crawled back into bed, but sleep wouldn't come. Around 2 a.m., the tapping turned into something else. Scraping. Slow, deliberate scratches against the wooden deck outside the cabin. I could barely breathe. My flashlight sat on the bedside table and I grabbed it, creeping toward the window. The beam caught a figure moving along the deck, tall, thin, dressed in dark clothing. I couldn't see their face. They didn't knock, didn't speak, just moved as if they belonged there. But I knew they didn't. I stumbled backwards, heart hammering. I thought about calling Clara, but my phone had no signal. I was utterly alone. The figure paused, almost as if aware that I was watching. Then it vanished. No footprints in the dew-covered deck. No sign anyone had been there. Nothing, except the cold sense that someone had been inside the cabin, observing me. By morning, I was shaking, exhausted from a night of terror. I stepped outside to the deck to survey the scene. The lake was calm, the sunlight peaceful. There were no signs of intrusion, nothing moved, and the world seemed normal again. I packed hastily and left, promising myself I'd never return. Weeks later, curiosity made me look for the listing online. It had vanished. The cabin no longer existed on Airbnb or Google Maps. The review history was gone. It was as if it had never been there at all. That night, I realized one horrifying truth. Whoever, or whatever, had been on that deck wasn't human. It didn't need the lock, didn't care about doors. It was patient, waiting for the next guest. Waiting for me, perhaps. if I ever returned. Even now, whenever I see a secluded lake or hear the wind scrape across old wood at night, I remember that whisper, that scraping sound, the silhouette moving with unnatural precision, and I know, deep down, it's still out there, somewhere, waiting. It was the first weekend of October 2021 when my friends and I decided to rent a Victorian-style Airbnb in upstate New York. We were all in our early 20s, craving an escape from the city and hoping for a few days of spooky fun before Halloween. The house itself looked like something straight out of a period drama. 3 stories tall, ornate woodwork on every balcony, and ivy creeping up its weathered brick walls. The listing promised authentic vintage charm and an unforgettable experience, but in hindsight, we should have taken that as a warning. We arrived in the late afternoon, the sun hanging low in the sky, casting long shadows across the front yard. The path to the house was overgrown with weeds, and the surrounding forest seemed unnaturally silent. The air smelled damp, with a faint scent of mold. Even as we carried our bags inside, the old wooden floors creaked beneath our weight, sending tiny shivers down our spines. The interior was stunning but eerie. Every room was filled with antique furniture, portraits of grim-looking ancestors lining the walls. The air felt heavy, as though the house itself was exhaling a quiet warning. We explored, joking nervously, but even our laughter seemed swallowed by the cavernous hallways. In the attic, we discovered a large, dust-covered trunk. Curiosity got the better of us, and we opened it. Inside was a porcelain doll, its face cracked, one glassy eye missing. It had a small hand-sewn dress that was faded and frayed. My friend Mia picked it up, laughing nervously. "She'll keep us company," she said, her voice a little too high-pitched. Something about the doll made my stomach tighten. That first night, we stayed in the main bedroom on the second floor. Around midnight, I woke to a faint giggling. At first, I thought it was Mia or another friend, but when I looked around, everyone was asleep. The giggling was soft and melodic, echoing from somewhere deep in the house. I froze. I heard footsteps, light, deliberate steps, moving down the hallway, then up the stairs to the attic. My heart raced as I realized it was coming from the very room where the doll had been. I grabbed my flashlight and crept toward the stairs, every nerve in my body screaming to stop. The attic door was slightly ajar. I nudged it open with the tip of my foot and shined the flashlight inside. The doll was sitting upright, facing the corner, and its cracked eye reflected the light in an almost lifelike way. I thought I must be imagining things, but then it moved. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, turning its head to face me. My heart leapt into my throat. I stumbled back and ran down the stairs. My friends were awake now, groggy and confused. I told them what I saw, and they laughed nervously, trying to brush it off. "It's just the house settling," someone said, but the tension in their voices told me they weren't convinced. Over the next 24 hours, strange things kept happening. The doll appeared in different rooms, never in the same place twice. The chandelier swayed slightly, even though the air was still. Doors I had locked the night before were found unlocked in the morning. Sometimes we would hear whispering, soft, almost inaudible, coming from the corners of rooms we weren't occupying. One night, I woke to the sound of scratching coming from the hallway outside our bedroom. I sat up, heart pounding, and noticed the shadow of a figure standing at the far end. Its movements were jerky and unnatural, like a puppet being pulled by invisible strings. I tried to speak, but my voice caught in my throat. "It's mine," it whispered. We couldn't stay. On the second night, we packed as much as we could and fled into the cold autumn air. We tried to call the host, but she was evasive, insisting no one had been in the house before us and that she had never received complaints. The sense of unease didn't fade as we drove away. Every rustle of the trees, every shadow in the corner of my vision reminded me of the doll, the whispering, the figure in the attic. Years later, I learned that previous tenants had reported similar experiences. The house had a long history, a family tragedy, disappearances, and rumors of spirits that refused to leave. It seemed that no amount of time or new occupants could break whatever had taken root there. Even now, when I walk past an old Victorian home or see a porcelain doll in a store, I feel that same cold dread. I know that somewhere in that empty house, the doll waits, along with the presence that claimed it long ago, ready to haunt the next unsuspecting visitor. It was mid-November 2020 when I booked a last-minute Airbnb in a small industrial town in Pennsylvania. Unlike my previous trips, this one was intended to be quick, a business meeting mixed with the chance to explore a city I had never visited. The listing was straightforward, a modern studio apartment above a closed storefront in the center of town. Cozy, convenient, and safe, it promised. The building itself looked nondescript. Red brick exterior, a single flickering fluorescent light over the entrance, and a narrow staircase that led up to the apartment. As I climbed, the air smelled faintly of damp concrete, and the echoes of my footsteps felt unnaturally loud in the empty building. When I opened the door, I was greeted by a small but functional space. A kitchenette, a queen-size bed, and a single chair by the window. The room was clean and modern, but there was something in the shadows that immediately made my skin crawl. That first night, I unpacked my bag and tried to settle in. The street below was quiet, the hum of a distant traffic light the only sound. Around 11:45 p.m., I was woken by a gentle, rhythmic knocking. At first, I assumed it was someone fumbling with trash bins outside the alley window, but the noise continued, deliberate, measured, and unnervingly patient. Knock, knock, knock. I peered through the blinds. Nothing. The alley was empty, dimly lit by a single streetlight. A cold draft swept through the room, despite the window being closed. Then, I heard it. A whisper, low, rasping. "Let me in." My pulse spiked. I checked every lock. The door was secure, the window bolted. Yet the presence of someone or something felt undeniable. I reached for my phone, but as if on cue, the signal was non-existent. The knocking evolved into scratching, soft at first, then more insistent. The sound moved, circling the apartment in an almost methodical pattern. Drawers in the kitchenette opened slightly, then shut. The chair by the window shifted as if someone had brushed against it. Every creak of the floorboards made my stomach twist. I was alone, or so I thought. At 2 a.m., I woke to the bedroom door creaking open. A shadow filled the doorway, tall and unnerving. I could feel it watching me, yet there was no sound of breathing. My legs felt paralyzed as I stared at the featureless figure. Its presence was suffocating, pressing against me like an invisible weight. "Don't leave," it whispered, low and guttural. Hours passed. I clutched a kitchen knife and the flashlight, alternating between scanning the room and holding my breath. Every flicker of the hallway light, every subtle movement of shadows set my nerves on edge. By 4 a.m., I realized the intruder wasn't human, at least not in any sense I understood. It didn't breathe, it didn't blink, and it didn't move like a person. Its presence was absolute, filling the small apartment with a sense of unbearable dread. At sunrise, everything was still. The figure had vanished. Nothing was out of place. The room looked ordinary in daylight, and the street below was empty, just like any other morning. But I knew the truth. I had not imagined the whispers, the shadows, the crawling terror that had haunted the apartment overnight. I left immediately,
packed and driving miles away before I even thought about breakfast. When I later attempted to contact the host, she seemed unconcerned and insisted no one else had been in the apartment. But I knew otherwise. The presence I felt that night wasn't tied to the building's owner. It was tied to the apartment itself, waiting for the next tenant, the next traveler foolish enough to think cozy meant safe. Even months later, when I hear a creak in my own apartment or a strange scraping at night, I can't shake the memory of that studio above the storefront. That whisper, that cold, faceless weight in the darkness, it lingers. And I know with certainty that somewhere in that city, the apartment remains, patient and waiting.